This will be a description of the very last assignment that you'll do regarding the documentary that you selected for earlier this semester. There's really 6 steps, I think, that I'll describe, and the last step will include some examples. Step 1 was to select the documentary. Step 2 was to view the film and answer the questions that were provided and submit them as a quiz. Now, there was an encouragement for you to participate in a barefaced discussion. It wasn't required, but it would have helped you perhaps to maybe bounce off some thoughts about the particular film that you selected. The next steps were to do some research, and there's a list of questions. There's instructions for this. It is looking for resources that support the perspective of the film, and then to look for 2 resources that oppose the perspective of the film. You are also asked to look at a couple videos. One is to look at persuasion techniques, biases, to think about who paid for it, so you can get an idea about what might be behind that film, and then to evaluate those resources using the CRAP test: currency, relevancy, authority. So that video that I asked you to look at was also part of your evaluation process. Step 6 was to do the final assessment, and that is to answer the quiz. So the quiz is going to require you to complete the assessment, to submit your assessment of those resources, and then one question has you identifying what resources would you use in your field. So I'm going to provide you what would be useful in my field. And in my field, it's exercise physiology. And so I have identified 5 journals. I think you're only asked to do 2, but peer-reviewed journals. A peer-reviewed journal is going to be one that has been evaluated by, has gone through a rigorous series of evaluations, usually a back and forth between the author and the journal with questions for clarification, and it takes a process of some time for that to occur, and then it gets published. So it's already been vetted by experts that are asked to review that research project or that research study or that article. So I have 5 that are listed here. When you are asked to provide peer-reviewed journals in your field, you want to include the journal, and if it is a web page, if there's a web page, you want to include that URL, and you're asked to provide a description of what that journal has. So for example, Medicine in Science and Sports and Exercise is one of 6 scholarly journals that's published by the American College of Sports Medicine, which is the primary organization of my profession. It contains both basic and applied research studies. So it has studies that looks at microscopic level research, looks at the cell, but also will look at applied, which would be application when you can like physical outcomes. Example web pages, one would be the American College of Sports Medicine and perhaps the American Heart Association. So the American College of Sports Medicine has a list of education, certification, has all kinds of resources for my field. It has a list of potential jobs. You'll want to have a description of that. The American Heart Association is a website that has standards of care and also research for heart disease, which is one of the key causes of or leading causes of death. And in my field, that's something that we are always interested in, is cardiovascular wellness. So the American Heart Association is a web page that I would potentially use. Example resource book would be the guidelines, exercise testing and prescription. This is known as quote unquote the Bible or one of them in my field. It shows research-based recommendations for developing exercise programs for healthy, for special populations, for field testing, all kinds of it's developed over the years. I think we're on our 12th edition in that particular resource book. So you'll be giving examples in your field. You'll be asked to identify a practical application question in your field where you would have to look at different resources to come up with an informed answer. So what's a question in your field? And one way that you can find a question would be to look at one of those journals that you identified in the previous question. One that I had identified is the Translational Journal of the American College of Sports Medicine. Look at the table of contents, and I thought, appetite regulation. That sounds interesting to me. So let's see what that's about. So this particular article was a follow-up from a 6-month program, and some individuals in that program were successful in losing a significant amount of weight and some were not. And so the authors wanted to question if appetite following exercise, did that have something to do with it? Did the individuals that struggled with weight loss, did they not have that normal decrease in appetite following exercise that is typical? So they basically wanted to evaluate what causes the change or what impacts appetite regulation. And so their question would be, somebody might say, why am I having such a struggle to lose weight when I'm exercising regularly? So that could be one of the a way that a person could ask that question to me. So the question is there. Now I have to think about how am I going to find out some resources to answer this question. Well, one would be to go to the guidelines book that I mentioned in the previous question and to look at what does my professional organization recommend for exercise and weight loss to see what the guidelines are. So then I know what's recommended. I also might want to look for some peer-reviewed articles. And so using Google Scholar, perhaps I want to put exercise and weight loss in, and I have 3 articles that popped up and kind of interesting. When we look at them, there's a 2019 article, a 2014, and a 2013. Now, part of what you'll be asked is to address why or why not are these resources valuable. So remember, we have our currency, the authority of our author. We've got those criteria that we're evaluating. And so even though this article is 2013, I can still potentially get some good information if I want to look at the difference between high intensity exercise and moderate intensity exercise to see if maybe exercise intensity has something to do with weight loss. Now, this isn't doing anything about appetite so far. This is just exercise for weight loss. So here it is. How does exercise fit in with weight loss and maintenance? So this is going to give me more information about what is recommended. Now, I can also narrow my research by shortening my time frame when I do my search by setting my parameters to maybe 5-6 years limit instead of just leaving it open. And I did do that with this particular question. So I went back in and I wanted to know about exercise and appetite control. So I set the parameters to 2019. So I get no journal, all my journal peer-reviewed articles are going to be no older than 2019. So here I have a 2024, 2023, a couple of them. And here I'm going to get some insights or some understanding about what kind of what happens with appetite control with exercise. And here it's going to give me some potential hormonal information about exercise and appetite. And so this would help me to answer that, address that question as well. I can also look at understanding appetite by looking at other experts, by looking at video. And this particular professor is from Montclair State University, and I collected his information here, and he does a really nice summary about the hormonal changes that occur with an acute bout of exercise. So this would help me to understand what happens with the hormones with exercise. And so this will give me more understanding about that particular, about my question. Now, what I would need to do is go back to that first article and see what the authors found in terms of what did the people that didn't lose weight, did they have any differences in their hormone response post-exercise than the folks that did lose weight? So you have to know what's normal and then what they had different. So that's kind of looking at some peer-reviewed journals, a research resource book, and then also a video. There are other resources that you can use. But I'm always thinking about my currency, my, whether or not these are good resources. A second way of attacking this assignment is to have maybe a question and that doesn't necessarily go back to that journal, but one that came to my mind is students would sometimes ask about the ketogenic diet, and is that healthy if I don't eat any carbohydrates? So I would want to look for research papers, peer-reviewed research papers that would look at ketogenic diets, whether they positively or negatively impacted performance. So I would find resources that would look at performance. I would probably want to look at type of exercise. Does it matter if it's weight training or aerobic training? And so I could get my peer-reviewed articles, and then I could also potentially find out what kind of experience athletes have. Who eats a ketogenic diet? And so I went looking, and there's a web page that has athletes that have been on a keto diet, and there's a whole list of them. And then you can go and click on those pages and see what kind of success, what kind of diet those individuals have had, what kind of challenges that they've had, and that would be what sport they played. So that would be another way to gather information. And then I could potentially interview any Bronco collegiate athletes and ask them what their practice is. How difficult is it? How long have they been on it? And what kind of challenges are they having? And I could put together a table of risks and benefits and challenges to help me develop a recommendation. I have to think about which one of those resources I'm going to rely most heavily on. I can take that information from the athletes and use that as informative, but I don't want to base my whole answer on just a couple athletes. I'd want to make sure that I have peer reviewed, a variety of, a vast, I throw my net out and look at different resources and evaluate all those resources in terms of their application and validity. So you will be asked to apply an example in your career. If you haven't selected one, you can come up with a question that you have that you're interested in. You'll just be asked to provide the question and explain and describe. And that's going to be step 3, looking for clarity. There's an instructions document, and then there's the quiz that will be identified as well. So that is the last assignment. It's ready for you when you are ready to go.